Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, basketball fans and onlookers alike, set aside your popcorn, fasten your seatbelts, and get ready for the most fulfilling dose of instant karma the WNBA has seen in years, because what happened on Saturday, June 14th, was more than just a basketball game. No, people, this was a masterclass in retaliation, a symphony of vindication, and a reminder that occasionally, just sometimes, the basketball gods have a sense of humor sharper than a flawless crossover eight. The Indiana Fever entered Gainbridge Fieldhouse with the sole goal of handing the unbeaten New York Liberty their first loss of the season, and guess who was leading the charge? That's right, Caitlin Clark, fresh off a 5-game layoff due to injury, was ready to remind everyone why she's the best. Back-Kane Clark drops 35 after her 5-game layoff from injury. At one point, she scored 9 points in less than 45 seconds, crossing the half-point line, dribbling, and simply pulling it from the logo. The Indiana Fever, the most exciting player in women's basketball, just defeated the New York Liberty 10,288, the league's undefeated team. Stephanie White did not play for the Liberty, who strutted in with a perfect 9-0 record, looking like they own the league. Spoiler alert, the Liberty were about to get a reality check so brutal that it would make a tax audit look like a spa day. However, this wasn't just any game, people. It was about settling scores and the evening. All of the Indiana Fever say, come on, New York, come on, somebody's got to give you this first L. And I suppose it will be us, John Quad Jones. But the Indiana Fever handled business 1-2-8-8. We finally reached triple digits thanks to CC2 Caitlin. You see, the last time these two teams faced each other, there was controversy thicker than your grandmother's gravy. On Thanksgiving morning, Natasha Cloud, the defensive specialist for the Liberty, had stripped the ball from Clark in the closing seconds of their last game, and Clark thought she had been fouled. A call never came, a grievance that lingered, and a memory that burned brighter than a phoenix summer. Are you not entertained? Kayla Clark put on a show. She dropped 25 points in the first half before being diamonded here and there. They scored more than 100 points for the first time this season, and they handed the New York Liberty their first loss. Take that L, head back to the Hudson River, and return to New York with that L. You understand what I mean, and I'm going to call her Sabrina I Flop You, because she's nothing but a flopping machine. I'm glad Caitlin Clark is taking that L today. She had 32 points, 7 for 14 from 3, which is 50%, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. She nearly had a double-double, almost a triple. If you're enjoying herself, please subscribe. While her team struggled and the WNBA's ratings fell like a lead balloon, she suffered a quad injury. The league realized how much they needed their golden goose when, without her on the court, viewership fell by an astounding 55%. It was like watching a blockbuster movie franchise attempt to continue without its main character. Technically possible, but nobody really wanted to see it. Then, on Saturday, Clark didn't just return, she stormed back onto the scene like a firework factory catching lightning. Caitlin Clark scored 9 points in 20 or 38 seconds with Natasha Cloud's name permanently inscribed on it. She was amazing, and I told the chat, call the cops on Caitlin Clark for logo abuse. From the first tip, you could feel the energy in the arena. The Liberty took an early 176-point lead, looking exactly like the reigning champions they were. They were moving the ball, hitting shots, and play with the assurance of a team that had forgotten what it was like to lose. For a brief moment, it appeared that Clark's comeback might only be a footnote rather than a headline. But then, with just over 3 minutes remaining in the first quarter, something incredible happened. You could see the spark ignite in her eyes as Clark made a 3-point play. That is Fever basketball at its best. And the Indiana Fever, by the way, had the fewest turnovers and the best fever I've had in a game since. In just 38 seconds, Clark made 3 consecutive three-pointers from distances that would make NASA envious. 33, 27, and 31 feet, all of which found nothing but net. The arena erupted like Mount Vesuvius, and the game was suddenly tied at 24. This was no longer just basketball, people. It was Clark telling the world that she was back. that her injury hadn't given her an advantage and that she had some unfinished business to attend to. We all said, oh, she's different. She's sent from outer space. The Caitlin Clark we saw today was the Caitlin Clark we were used to. The woman was shooting from distances that required a GPS system, and every shot was falling like autumn leaves in October. Wade 3 threes and 38 seconds in the first half. Caitlin Clark hit 3 logo bombs, by the way. The Liberty made a final desperate push in the third quarter, opening with a 9 run that momentarily restored their confidence. But Clark and the Fever responded with the basketball equivalent of a nuclear option, a 190 run that left the Liberty looking like they needed a map to find the basket every time. The Fever led 53-50 points, and you could see the worry creeping into the Liberty's eyes like morning shadows. This wasn't the script they had written for their perfect season. Every time New York attempted to rally, Clark had an answer like a magician with an endless supply of rabbits. She pulled another three-pointer out of her bag of tricks. This was by far one of the best and most outstanding performances we have ever seen from Caitlin Clark. Now, I must remind everyone that she is recovering from an injury, but what we witnessed today was incredible. It was a lot like the Michael Jordan flu game, bro. The strange thing about all of this is that the referees were unable to save them. The last time the referees were able to save New York, and they won. This time the game was so far out of reach that the referees had to just watch. And throughout it all, Natasha Cloud was there trying to protect the unguardable, trying to stop a force of nature with a basketball equivalent of an umbrella in a hurricane. The irony was that the same player who had dashed Clark's hopes when the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard showed 88 points, 32 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, and 7 three-pointers, tying her career high for made threes. However, the numbers were impressive because they only told part of the story. This was about more than just statistics. It was about making a statement, settling scores, and sending reminders. The Fever had set a franchise record with 17 made three-pointers on 48. The last meeting was now watching helplessly as Clark methodically destroyed her team's perfect record. I'm glad that New York received that loss. They should have received the loss in the other game. Now, they simply received what they deserved. All right, but Caitlin Clark went off, and I'm glad that's what people pay to see. They reached triple digits for the first time this season, and they had dealt the powerful Liberty their first defeat, but more importantly, they accomplished it with Clark leading the charge like a general ordering her troops into battle. Sabrina Ionescu did her best to keep pace with 34 points, and Breanna Stewart added 24 points. But it wasn't enough to stop the Clark tornado that swept through Indianapolis. The Liberty entered the game as the last unbeaten team in the WNBA and left with their perfect record on the floor. She makes the entire offense way better. The offense is clicking. They're getting to their spots. For the Liberty, this loss wasn't just a number in the standings. It was a reality check wrapped in humility and delivered with a side of humble pie. The basketball gods, who apparently have a sense of humor, decided that this was Caitlin Clark's night for redemption. As I mentioned earlier, Natasha Cloud's leananity run is over. However, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the point guard on the court. Just weeks ago, this player had been so confident in her defensive prowess that she ended up on the losing end of one of the most dominant individual performances in recent WNBA history. Allie Mitchell was also affected by the Player of the Week curse, which we witnessed until the very end of that game when she was extremely clutch, but her linsanity runs over. I received a direct message from someone saying, Natasha Cloud is great. What are you talking about, her linanity run? I asked, was her linanity run? I replied, she can play defense. She isn't even a great offensive player. Forget the referees. It was allegedly a foul on Lexi Hull, and there were a lot of them throughout the game. Breanna Stewart made 14 free throws. Stewie made 14, and half of them were found. The great thing about sports is that they give these kinds of stories a platform. Here, Clark was back from injury with something to prove, facing off against a player who had denied her a chance to win the game in their previous meeting. Not only did she prove her point, but she did so in the most forceful way possible. Clark's return has rekindled interest in the WNBA in ways that executives could only imagine. Social media exploded with highlights, ticket prices for future Fever games skyrocketed by as much as 366%, and all of a sudden, everyone was talking about women's basketball again. She did this by outperforming everyone on the court and leading her team to victory against the league's best team. The game's ripple effects go far beyond the final score. This is what people pay to see, guys, which is why the T is rather high when she's on TV. It's fun to watch girls ball out back-to-back threes from the logo, man. And I was so glad that she's out there having fun tonight. This game served as a perfect case study of Clark's impact on the sport. When she's healthy and playing, the WNBA becomes a must-see television arena. Clark's absence served as a reminder, once again, why she's the most popular athlete in America. Clark's impact goes beyond the ticket office. During her injured absence, nationally televised Fever games averaged just 847,000 viewers, which is 53% lower than her pre-injury average of 1. Sellout ratings climb and casual fans turn into ardent supporters. Her comeback against the Liberty drew 2 out of 8 million. It's the third most viewed WNBA game of the season, with 7 million people on ABC. This isn't a coincidence, rather, it's systematic. The Clark effect has fueled the... Caitlin Clark is the definition of undeniable, and her return to the Indiana Fever demonstrated that. The Fever became the first WNBA team to have 1 million social media followers on any platform, and their merchandise sales increased so sharply that the team store was audited for suspicious revenue spikes. Ticket prices for her games regularly exceed $600.00, and her presence has contributed an estimated $36 million. 0 cents to $500 million, 0 cents to the Indianapolis economy in 2024 alone. When Caitlin Clark plays the WNBA, it's not just relevant, it's a cultural event. Her absence served as a reminder of how much the league depends on her star power, and her triumphant return was like watching the sun emerge from behind storm clouds. It felt like a jolt of energy to the WNBA once more, especially to the Indiana Fever, who looked like a completely different team. Clark's performance was the first L for the Liberty on the court. WNBA engagement per post is 16 times higher than the NBA, and the Liberty game demonstrated this with courtside tickets selling for $2.00, 5,000, and the arena's noise levels hitting the mark. Her ability to combine old school grit with new school flair is demonstrated by her logo threes and no-look passes, which highlight real obsessives, while her unapologetic competitiveness, demonstrated by her fiery reaction to Cloud's defensive physicality, resonates with purists. This duality has created a fan base that spans generations. At one point, when she pulled from the logo, she and Stewart were just laughing because it was so unbelievable. I told you, face to the league. For Natasha Cloud and the Liberty, this loss will sting for a while because they had been riding high on their championship pedigree and defensive excellence, but Clark reminded them that perfection is fragile and even the best laid plans can fall apart. During her introduction, she shouted at a volume of $116.00 dB, louder than most NFL stadiums.